I want to start working on another book. No idea where to start.
Today, I am joined by Keith Burke, who to be honest, I'm so thrilled to have connected with on Twitter. So, Keith is a TV producer living in LA, but he's also a debut author. He's written a really gorgeous paranormal romance that has had some really lovely reviews. So, we will be putting a link to that book in the description below. Keith, thank you for joining me, and thank you for being brave enough to have a live recorded coaching session for my audience.
Thank you for having me. I'm an introvert, so this is definitely out of my wheelhouse, and I'm sure you can tell by me stuttering right off the bat. But we'll just go with it and have some fun.
With any coaching session, where we begin is simply by saying, what do you want to talk about today?
I'd probably say, I mean, for me, the interesting thing is, with the first book, the story came really easy to me because it is a personal story. And now that it's sort of out in the universe, I have 700 ideas, and everyone I'm like, this is great. And then 3 seconds later, I'm like, this is terrible. Why is this? Nope. Next idea. And I've sort of whittled it down to a couple, I think, but same thing. I have little nuggets of scenes that I want, but story, nope. And it's not clicking the way it did with the first book.
And often it can be that first book does flow, like it feels really natural, especially if it's a personal story. And then it sounds like there's a little bit of judgment that's crept in around the ideas that are flowing. So you've whittled it down though. So we've gone from 700 ideas to just a couple of ideas.
Yes. But 2 weeks ago, I thought they were great ideas. This week, I definitely second guessing, like, how did I write the first book? Because these ideas are now not great. So it's strange because, like I said, the first book, is sort of a metaphor for some things I went through in my life. So I knew pretty much where I wanted the story to go from the moment I sat down to write. And this one, I think it is fear because I'm really proud of the first book, and I just don't want to write something terrible for the second one.
What difference would it make if you had an idea that you were like, oh, this feels like the last goodbye?
That I'm doing the right thing, in terms of the story, with the last goodbye, like I said, it all flowed, and I tend to free write. So the story did take some turns that I wasn't expecting as I was writing it. But, with this, it's more, I'm not even sure it's the right story to tell, and I think that's sort of stopping me because I do a basic outline, before I write, and I'm stuck on outlining because every time I start, I'm like, I'm not feeling the same feelings that I felt when I was doing the first book.
Yeah.
So it's my brain's I'm not feeling very creative.
Yeah, right.
Which is hard for me because that's the world I live in, is like, I'm always creative.
Yeah.
So when I'm just sitting there stuck, it's very frustrating.
Yeah, I can imagine that. And also because you've got that comparison. So it makes sense. Like you're saying this idea of like, it feels like you're doing the right thing versus not. So if you associate that feeling of creativity and flow with doing the right thing, kind of makes sense that there's this fear that's creeping in because it doesn't feel like that. But let's get a little bit more definition, Keith, because we can have this like, I want to feel like I'm doing the right thing, but what do you mean by right?
Well, for me, I've always wanted to write. One of my degrees is in literature. I just sort of stumbled into television by accident. And I've been in TV for, aging myself a little, 18, 19 years now. And I love TV, but it's time for me to sort of put myself first and do the sort of creative stuff that I want to do. And I wrote the first book while I was doing a couple of TV shows, and it felt like the right thing to do for me personally, and then in terms of like a career and a future and sort of where I wanted things to go. And that's sort of the feeling that like I've not that I don't think I'll ever stop working in television. It's fun, and I couldn't do a real job like in an office. I'm just not built that way. Um, but it felt like I was taking the next step in terms of sort of like my creative journey. And that I would say is the feeling that I'm struggling with not feeling at the moment.
In terms of the next step in your career, so you, and I can see that from your bio on Amazon, like you've got a literature background and a background in
I do.
classics as well. So I'm getting a sense that it might be nice for you to start to incorporate that. And I know that there's some mythology and stuff in your paranormal romance. So like a sense of wanting to bring that in. So if you were to think about the next step with a career as a writer and some of the components that you might like to bring into a new book, so like aside from what the idea is, some things that might stretch you, that might challenge you, that might reward you personally, like if we were to just brainstorm, what would you come up with?
Well, I think it for me, I in terms of books that I read and I connect with, there has to be sort of an element that I think I can relate to in my own life.
Mm-hmm.
And The Last Goodbye is very much an adult story, but um, I do have a couple of kids that are, one is will be 7 soon, and the other just turned 3, and they're obviously a huge part of my world, and I do like the ideas I'm tossing around are younger stories, or middle grade or like young adult, because I I want to write some stories for them. So that's, I think there's in a weird way, not that they would be disappointed or anything, but like not to disappoint them also and write a story that's not fun for them. So I think I'm trying to do too much instead of just like whittle it down to just tell a fun story that's something that they would enjoy.
What if you could do as little as possible and it could just be for you? What difference would that make?
That would be more fun. you know because I when I was writing the first book, i I wasn't even sure if I was going to publish it or try to publish it. I um like I said, I was going through some things in my life that writing the book helped me process a lot of what I
Mm.
was feeling, and things that I was struggling with, and sort of helped me come out the other side of it. So if I never published it, that would have been okay, because it would have just been a story for me. Um, I think now that I have published a book, and the general response from people that have read it are like, "Wow, you can actually write." I'm like, "Great, I hope so." I now have like the thought in my head of like, "Oh, I can write. Uh, what if I can't do it again? What if?" And then there's too many other things that are coming in my head, and I'm not just having fun with just telling a story.
It sounds like with the first one, there was nothing to lose
Right.
because it didn't have to get published. Nobody had to see it. Like it was just for you to work through something.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because when I said to you, what if it could just be about one thing? What if it could just be about you? Like it was very subtle, but your face, like not that your face is looking tense, but your
Well,
your
probably a
face.
little. I'm talking about myself. It's not comfortable for me.
Honestly, I have forgotten that already. Like I'm just listening to you speaking at ease, but your face just slightly relaxed, and you were like, that would be fun. Like I got a sense that that took a weight off.
Mm. Oh, wow. Yeah, that's true. I mean, well, part of working in television is you sort of have to fake it.
Mm.
If you're, because, speaking about myself, I'm quite uncomfortable, to be totally candid. but in TV, you sort of have to pretend like you know what you're talking about, and put on this air of confidence, and then you internally panic and freak out. Um, but it would be nice to just sort of turn off all the thoughts that are in my head and just write just even if it's not a story that ends up being, oh, I never really thought about that it doesn't, the next story I write maybe isn't something that I publish. Maybe it's just something that I write. So I just sort of get the cobwebs out of my head.
Okay, there's some cobwebs in my head, there's some thoughts here. But again, it's like this book is just another book where I can process. I can process my feelings, maybe even process these thoughts.
One thing that I struggle with now is, having been in television for as long as I have been, I'm at a certain point in my career where, I have had a fair amount of success. And to start, a second career in essence, one that's more for me, I'm doing comparison, which I think is also, causing a lot of writer's block in my head. It's like, well, I have, all this success over here. And, I self-published this book because when I was reaching out to agents and all that, I struck out quite a lot, which was very humbling for, what little ego I had at the time. So at first I saw self-publishing as like a defeat, that I couldn't get an agent. But since it's come out, that sort of changed because it has gotten, pretty positive response from people. So that made me feel like, okay, I just didn't, find the right person to connect with.
Yeah.
Took me a little while to get there. But I think that's sort of where I'm at now, is that like, it's okay to be starting from scratch, and like conceptually I understand that, but then when feelings and things get involved, and there's a lot of doubt.
What I'm noticing is you're like, okay, I've had success as a TV producer, so there's some comparison there, which is ending up with your starting out your journey as an author, as it's not doing so well in that comparison. But what if we were to flip it and be like, okay, this is why it's so great that I'm coming onto this new path that's separate from that, and this is why it's so great to start from scratch.
I would say no expectations, which that is scary for me, because it's exciting, but that's also scary because I'm a pretty quiet person. I don't like why I'm a producer is I get to be behind the camera, and I get to sort of be somebody that can hide and, still do my job, still be creative, but you're not sort of the figurehead or the thing in front of the camera that everyone's seeing. As I've gotten older, I'm in my 40s now, I've wanted to sort of step out of my comfort zone more and try it. Writing a book and putting it out there is sort of me like jumping off into the deep end, which I think I'm still kind of finding my sea legs a little bit. Because I definitely have days where I'm really scared about it, and other days where I'm excited about it and it's fun and I don't have to answer to anybody. But I think I'm still working through a lot of that. My partner, who's amazing, he's been really helping me sort of promote and market the book and things like that. And he's organizing an in-person, signing and reading. And he's excited and I am terrified because I'm just going to be standing in front of people. I'm worried I'm going to forget how to read and just stand there and just like start sweating and throw up everywhere. But I kind of need to force myself to do it.
What would you say is the benefit of like really stepping into that, like despite all of these fears, like continuing along this path And as you said, there's no expectations in this new arena.
I have a feeling that once I do it, it's not going to be as scary as I thought it was. Um, because a lot of my job is, you know, having to put myself out there and, deal with a lot of stuff. And I do get told a lot. They're like, I actually didn't know you were an introvert or shy because, you seem comfortable. I'm like, well, I've had a lifetime of learning how to fake it. So you can't see it.
Yeah.
So I sort of feel, part of me thinks that it'll give me the confidence to move forward. I'm just still in the internal panic terror phase of preparing for it.
I want you to imagine that there's a version of you who's completed that second book. Okay. They've experienced that confidence to move forward. They have experienced the fun that they were able to tap into. Like, they sort of made that project all about fun. They used some of the writing experience to process their feelings. The book is highly relatable. Like, there's that relatable aspect to it. And they really enjoyed the lack of expectations. What do you imagine when you imagine that version of you in the future who's sort of on the other side?
I think for me, that would be sort of a place where I would stop feeling like I have to compare myself to other people. I do have, friends in town that, are writers. They're, quite successful. And I definitely compare myself to them. Same thing with people in television. I even though I have achieved, a fair amount of success, I always compare myself to everybody else, instead of just being comfortable and proud of my own success. Sort of putting myself first is something that I'm not great at, and I struggle with a lot. I worry about everybody else, and I take care of everybody else, and I look at other people's success, even if I've had the same level or in some cases even more, and I don't see my successes in the same way that I see other people's, if that makes sense.
It does. Yeah, it makes total sense. And interestingly, you meant, this idea that you're like, I'm not very good yet at putting myself first. And that sort of ties back to that question that I asked you where I was like, what if this was just about you? And you were like, that's interesting.
Yeah. Ooh, uncomfortable. Okay.
Yeah. And so it's,
Yeah.
it really seems like that's the territory that you're being drawn to, because if you think about it, you said that version of you who's done it, they're in a place where no comparisons are necessary.
Mm-hmm.
And also they're comfortable and they're proud of their own success. So what would it be like to really imagine that this is what's calling you, Keith? This version of you who's like, hey, buddy, no comparisons necessary here. Like, oh my God, it's so great. Here I am. And I'm just like able to like really see my success, and I'm putting myself first.
It'd be nice. I mean, because the thing that I always forget that I'm actually my age, because I don't think, I mean, I work in an industry where everyone has Peter Pan syndrome and we're all like 15 and, we're just like, oh, wait, we're adults too. Along with that sort of comes along, I mean, what comes along with that also is those constant insecurities and like, I'm never good enough and things like that. It would nice to, I look at some friends that have nothing to do with entertainment and I'm like, oh, you're like an adult. What's that like? Because I still feel like the awkward, 16-year-old that like has no idea what's going on. And I'm like, oh, okay, I'm just going to go do this now. And it'd be nice to feel a little more of an adult version of myself.
all of what you're saying, Keith, I'm really understanding why you're here, feeling this desire to create this new arena for yourself. Like there's no specific rules in this new arena as an author. There's potentially no expectations other than these up here.
Right.
But that's part of the work. That's part of the work when we work on new goals. We take the actions, but we also do the work up here on our mindset. So we've got no comparisons necessary. You're able to really experience your own success, and you can feel this adult version of you. You don't have to let go of the 15-year-old, like that sort of youthful experience, but you also like, oh, okay, feeling a little bit more of an adult here too.
Yeah, I mean, it would be nice, because on currently in my TV career, I am one of the executive producers on the shows that I do, so I am at the sort of top of the food chain. And what I always hear from the rest of the team is that they're like, we forget you're the boss because you don't really act like the boss. And I'm like, is that good? Is that bad? They're like, no, it's good because we can come talk to you. I'm like, great, I like that. They're like, but you also don't always seem like you're, how do I say this? There's, not currently, but in my career, I've worked, with people that will say their personalities can really fill a room, is I guess the nice way to say that. I would like to have the positive version of that like there's like a command of a situation that I can fake, but I don't really feel.
Yeah.
I like the fact that everyone likes working with me and they're, you're fun and easy to talk to. And, that's great. I don't want to lose that, but it would be nice to have that sort of, I mean, I weirdly equate it to adult side of me, which I don't know is quite there yet.
Okay, so we've got also this command of a situation. So not sort of filling up a room with your ego, but a command of a situation. Like I get a sense it's like it's much more of an internal, like an internal finding of yourself almost. That just came
Yeah,
to
I think that's a good way to put it, because I, in my 30s, I was definitely still figuring out a lot of things. And now I definitely feel like in my 40s, I'm much more comfortable in my skin and I'm more aware of the parts of me that I think are not where I would like them to be.
Yeah.
But I don't know how to get to them, get them to the place that I want them to be. Yeah.
Yeah. That's interesting, because you mentioned your first book was an experience to process your feelings. What if this next book was a way for you to figure out how to be the person that you want to be and how to process and, heal or release the parts of you that you don't want to be, and how to become this sort of fully realized adult, commanding, I'm okay with, I'm seeing my success, no comparisons are necessary. What if this book, like whatever the idea was, it was just simply a process that was going to take you to the next level of Keith?
It's interesting because I thought sort of whittling down the ideas was more me finding like what would be a good story. Maybe it is more because the first book was so easy for me to write because the thoughts were all in my head. I just, turned the thoughts into, a story. I hadn't really thought of that. Yeah. Okay, I'm a little uncomfortable now. Well, that's, I don't even know how to phrase this. That's the exciting part of the first book is that I got the feelings out, but then sort of the scary part that came with it is, the people that know me that have read it have asked, are like, is that what this means? And I'm like, it's I didn't think people would read it and then want to talk about my feelings. But it has sort of helped me officially close. I'm not sure I understand. Oh, sorry, my Siri's talking to me. She doesn't understand either. I think it helped me sort of officially close the door on some of those feelings. Not to give too much away about the book, because I would like people to read it, but I used to be married, about 10 years ago. And the story is sort of how I process like the death of one relationship and then the birth of a new one. So it was very personal. So I think you can tell I'm pretty uncomfortable talking about it, but it is sort of important to sort of get more comfortable dealing with those feelings and things like that. So it was easier to write, but then it's harder to discuss.
Yeah.
But I think that is sort of where I'm heading in life, is that most of my life I like being in the shadow. So it's not being scared to talk about things that, put you in this uncomfortable state.
It's so intriguing, Keith, because it's almost like the book has created the scenario that without the book wouldn't happen. Like it's created the talking point, or it's created the live reading. So without it, none of that would happen. But with this book, which is sort of the vessel, you're now being asked about specific feelings. You're now having to stand up in front of a group of people and read from the book. So it's sort of almost like what's coming to me is it's like this sort of unconscious act that then pulls you into the place that you really want to get to, but you don't know how to get to. But the book is the way that you're going to get there.
Yeah. I never really thought about it that way.
I'm not saying that's right. That's just, just sitting with you, like
I don't
holding
think
space.
I don't think that's wrong. Because it's, like I said, I'm more of an observer. I've always been that way. I'm participating isn't always my strong suit in life and situations. But I'm always a little jealous of people that are, that sort of type. Like, why can't I be more like that? And now, in a weird way, you're right. I've sort of unconsciously thrown myself in a situation where I am that, and it's terrifying. But the sort of intellectual side understands that it probably isn't going to be as scary as I think it is. I mean, I was terrified for this conversation. I was pacing up and down my hallway, like going, "Oh God, oh God, oh God, what do I say?" But this has been a really nice chat so far, and I've, after the first 5 minutes of me fumbling over everything I'm saying, even though you're questioning me on things that are out of my comfort zone and I usually don't talk about, it's not that scary to talk about it.
Keith, if you hadn't reminded me a few times that you were uncomfortable, I literally would have had no idea. Like the pace at which you're talking, it's actually giving me the impression that you're calm and you're just being really thoughtful about what you say. So
I'm a professional at faking it.
Yeah.
I have joking aside, I've definitely gotten, more comfortable the second half of the conversation. It's interesting because I, working, through, the last couple of years, we're all working from home and I'm quite comfortable on a Zoom now. But I'm also used to having 20 people on a Zoom where, you can kind of pay attention and then, oh God, they're talking to me. What? Sorry, internet's not working. Can you repeat that? So I think part of what I was really nervous is it's just going to be us talking, which is, having like I said, having the focus on me is not my favorite place, but it's been a nice chat. So also you're very easy to talk to. So that's helpful.
Let's just take a moment to reflect, Keith. We started the conversation with you talking about wanting to write a second project, and you mentioned having 700 ideas. And then you said that you'd whittled it down, but there's always questioning. You were like, last week I thought they were pretty good, and now I'm questioning it. And then you did mention, you were like, I think it has got something to do with fear. Okay. Now, when I'm having a coaching conversation with someone, it's not about me saying, right, let me write you a prescription. This is what you need to go and do. It's much more like, especially with the first conversation, because we're just figuring things out. We're just opening up. But I feel like we've come to this place, and I feel like we're on the same page with this, where there's an understanding of like this unconscious desire to write the book is about taking you to where you want to get to, and you don't know how to get there any other way, but the book is a great medium. So what if you were to, just allow yourself over the next few weeks, rather than to think about, what's this idea and how am I going to plot it out, to be like, actually, the idea is not the important thing. It's actually about just writing the next book. And as you said, it doesn't have to get published, but I just get the sense that the book is just the next part of your personal development process. So it's not about like what's going to be a great idea. It's just, how am I just going to write something and process where I'm at, and perhaps explore the feelings that are coming up with me, the comparisons and the success piece and the adult piece, and to just trust a little bit, like with the first book.
I do think the ideas that I have, I think I'm coming back around to they're not the worst ideas I've ever had in my life. So, but I don't think I'm excited to write them yet. I think maybe that's why I'm stuck on them. And like things aren't coming to me, is I might just not be ready to write those stories yet. And I may be a different kind of writer, because I read a fair amount, and you can obviously tell that sometimes writers are like, this has no connection to your life whatsoever. You are just able to write the story and it has no personal connection. I might not be that kind of writer, because I think part of what was fun about writing the book is that I got to sort of like regurgitate all the feelings that were sort of stuck in me. And, the story did change a fair amount from, as all stories do, from like the first draft to like what, was published, but the feelings didn't, the sort of things that I had to sort of get out. So maybe that's, the kind of writer I am, that like, if it's not a personal story or something that I can sort of latch onto, then it's not that fun to write, and I sort of don't know what to write.
And that makes sense, because there isn't the connection that's obviously important for you. Like, you basically said for the first one, you just turned your thoughts into a story. So that is going to have like an effortless or real connective tissue feeling about it, versus like, right, let me come up with a concept and let me plot it out. So let's just take a moment to reflect in terms of, what would you say that you know now that you didn't know at the start of our conversation?
It's okay to not know where I'm going. I think that's, still processing it a little bit, like how to put it into words, but the sort of thought that I kept having in my head is, okay, well, the second book, I'm going to get an agent. And then, so to sort of stop the expectations and the sort of, it's okay to not have, it's journey. You don't need to know where the destination is just yet, maybe, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So to just also remember that you like writing.
Yeah.
I keep sitting at my laptop and I'm going, ugh, okay, I'm going to go for a walk, because nothing's, and I just keep I'm on this like loop where I'm just annoyed.
Yeah.
And I'm forgetting that like, oh, I had a lot of fun writing the first book. Even though it was heavy stuff for me to deal with, I still enjoyed writing it.
Yeah.
I think that's sort of what I need to remember.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I think what and I think it just sort of popped in my head. Like I think I need to stop seeing it as a second career because
Mm.
I have a career and I'm it works for me and this can be something that's just for me, because
Yeah.
the reason I sort of after I wrote how do I say this? After I finished the first book, before I published it, I let a few people read it, that I trust, even, and they knew I was panicking. And they were sort of the ones that pushed me into publishing it and trying to publish it. All I asked them was like, I don't want to know like anything other than does it feel like a story? Like that is all I wanted to know. And the three of them that saw it, they're like, "This is a book." I'm like, oh, "Don't tell me that, because then I'm gonna throw up everywhere." They're like, "No, no, 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 you should publish it." I'm like, "How?" They're like, "Figure it out." I'm like, "Oh God." And then I sort of, went into like, is this another career? And
Mm-hmm.
it can be something that I just do, you know, for fun. I mean, I've having self-published it, like, you constantly look at sales and you're like, well, I it's nice when people buy it, but I'm not really like worrying about it that much because it is the first one I've ever done. So like, oh great, I sold one today. Cool. You
Yeah.
know. That being said, like I've got friends that have books that are like on the New York Times list. I'm like, well, that'd be nice. I sold 3 this week, and like I crack a joke about it, but I'm also like, but I would like to know how much you sold.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but maybe I need to stop thinking about it that way and just, I have a successful career and that's okay. And this can just be something that I just enjoy. And if it turns into something great,
Mm.
if it never goes beyond me self-publishing and just being, happy with what I do, then that could be okay too.
Keith, I'm so honored that you've been so open, even though it has not been in your comfort zone. And I know that people watching this coaching conversation will have got a lot of value from it. And I'm going to encourage, like those of you who have watched, I'm going to encourage you, pop some stuff down in the comments below, like what resonated with you. I just have a sense of people watching this video being like, he's literally speaking what's in my heart. So thank you so much for your vulnerability today and for trusting me.
Thank you for having me.